Numbers chapter 21. Welcome again to another episode of Papa John's Scripture Notes. I hope you're enjoying this study of the book of Numbers. It's an interesting book. I mean, Numbers sounds so boring. Sounds like math. It sounds like accounting. But remember, this is basically in the Hebrew version of the Scriptures. I believe it's called something about the wilderness or the desert, which has a little more interest. And they've definitely been wandering. As Halverson says, they wander, die. And they've had a chance to redeem the land and go into the promised land, yet they chose not to. And God says, all right, you won't even ever enter, only your children. And so Jared Halverson says in verse 21 is the famous story, the story of the brazen serpent, Israel avoiding Edom, still working its way towards the promised land. A Canaanite king attacks them. Israel promises to fight if God will deliver them, and he does. All is well. So they continue their journey still forward. So, hey, I guess we just end the episode right there. Let's keep going. Jono Vandor, our Messianic believer from Australia, then says, and he's going to read from his New King James Version, and now there's an attack, the Canaanites. The king of Arad, the Canaanite who dwelt in the land in the south, heard that Israel was coming along the road, and he fought with them. He took some of them prisoners. How about that? Jono says. So Israel made a vow to Jehovah and said, if you will indeed deliver this people into my hand, then I will utterly destroy their cities. And Jehovah listened to the voice of Israel and delivered up the Canaanites, and they utterly destroyed them and their cities, so that the name of the place was called Hormah. Hormah. That's a tough sound for Papa John. Nehemiah Gordon he pronounces it, I'm sure, better than I can. I wish you could hear his voice. You should follow Nehemiah if you ever get a chance to. But he is such a scholar, it's hard to keep up with him. But anyway, he says Hormah is from the word Horam, like we would say Horam, but Horam. And it says here, Vi or Veye Haram, meaning, and he utterly destroyed. So Horah is utterly destroyed. So God does what he said he would do, and they're back to being safe again. Verse 4, and they journeyed from Mount Hor by the way of the Red Sea to compass the land of Edom. And then our LDS scholar Jared Halverson picks it up from there. The soul of the people was much discouraged because of the way. So then Jared says, only one verse after God delivered them from their enemy. Yes, it happens quickly, and they're already discouraged. Verse 5, again, Jared Halverson, and the people spake against Elohim, against God, and against Moses. Then Jared adds, there's always seems to be the wimpy, they always seem to be the whipping boys, and take out my frustrations on God. I don't believe him and take out their frustrations on the prophet. I don't want to follow him either. And then they say, wherefore have you brought us up out of Egypt to die in the wilderness? Not this again, right? For there is no bread, neither is there any water, and our soul loatheth this light bread. And that's the manna Jared Halverson is helping us realize. Are we looking every gift horse in the mouth? Are we complaining about everything God has provided for us just because it's not exactly the kind that we asked for? What do you mean there's no bread? I gave it to you every morning. What do you mean there's no water? You've had water every time you've ever asked for it. But here, yes, they're frustrated yet again. Continuing on, Jared Halverson, verse 6, and Yehovah sent fiery serpents among the people, and they bit the people, and much people of Israel died, dropping like flies. And now fiery? And Jared says, with two verses in Isaiah, the word translates as fiery is actually the word seraphim, or seraphim, which is the word for some kind of heavenly being. So we've got cherubs, we've got seraphim, and we've got cherubim, or I think in Hebrew it's seraphim and cherubim, at least for plural. Anyway, these heavenly creatures with wings overshadow the Ark of the Covenant. Seraphim must be some kind of similar heavenly beings, but of a fiery sort. Then he adds, so are these literal snakes? Perhaps. I don't know. Are they fiery in a literal way? Perhaps. Again, he says, I don't know. The fire might actually refer to the sensation of burning you feel from venom that courses through your veins. That's a possibility too. So, how literal, how figurative, how natural, how divine? Oh, I'm sure the answer is yes, a little of everything. But here they are suffering as a result of their own sin, and they've admitted to it right there, well, coming up in verse 7. But before we get there, Jono Vandor from Australia says, verse 4, you shall not make for yourself a carved image. So he's quoting Exodus. Okay, so Jono says, hey, back in Exodus 20, verse 4, it says, you shall not make for yourself a carved image, any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water underneath. Ye shall not bow down to them nor serve them. Jonah says, now I understand, of course, they're not bowing down, at least not yet, to this snake. But you see the question that he's raising. So Nehemiah Gordon, our Hebrew scholar, says, I think this actually shows that the purpose there of that commandment is dealing with things that are then to be worshipped, meaning don't make yourself an idol to worship, is what I think it's saying in the second commandment. So if you think about it, like little children 3,000 years ago, is God telling the Israelites, don't make for your children little toy horses and little toys? Is that really what it means? And he says they actually did have toys back then. If anybody's laughing and saying they didn't, they did, and they had made them out of pottery and little earthenware horses. We find them in excavations that they used as toys. I don't think that was a prohibition to not let your children have toys. I think the point there, back in Exodus, was don't make things that, well, don't give an idol to worship. Now the problem here is what happens afterwards. And now we turn to, again, our LDS scholar, Jared Halverson. And this is the verse he talked about where they confess that they have sinned. Verse 7, the people came to Moses and say, we have sinned. Finally, an important admission. Then he continues, for we have spoken against the Lord, but we're going to restore the name. It's against Yehovah and against thee. Then Jared says, so this is a very specific confession. They realize what they've done. Hey, that's progress, Papa John's. You're going to interject here. We're talking about the children of Israel, and some of these are growing older. And like we learned in the last chapter, they had spent some time there. Like there's 30 plus years that have passed during this 2 chapters, I believe Nehemiah said. So there's actually spiritual maturity in the fact that they can repent and confess quickly, which wasn't the case with their parents. But some of the parents are still, I'm sure, part of this crowd. Anyway, so pray unto Yehovah, they begged, that he may take away the serpents from us. So they knew that help would have to come from God. And they turned to their mediator, the prophet, to seek it. And what did Moses do? He prayed for the people, willing to intercede as always. They're turning to God in the right way. I see progress in a way that I haven't seen before. And I really appreciate the insights about the timeline from Nehemiah. So now we're getting into this image, this brass serpent that Jonah was concerned about, some type of idol worship. But there's a rendition of that. And then Jared, our LDS scholar, says, verse 8, and I believe 9, and Yehovah said unto Moses, make thee a fiery serpent, and set it upon a pole, and it shall come to pass that everyone that is bitten, when he looketh upon it, shall live. And Moses made a serpent of brass, and put it upon a pole. No questions asked, Jared says, just totally trusted and acted immediately. And back to the verse, and it came to pass that if a serpent had bitten any man, when he beheld the serpent of brass, he lived. That's it. Yes, that's it. Halverson says. And the rest of this chapter just describes Israel's movement towards the promised land. Again, we could just wrap up this episode right here. And you're like, please? We'll wrap it up soon enough. Here we go. Keith Johnson, back to our Methodist minister. He says, I think that one of the things I want to look at again, and I think what Nehemiah just brought up is a great example. No, the point that he's saying here is that there's this bronze snake that's been made for this purpose, and how he actually wants to have this bronze snake in terms of bringing healing. He's not saying make this bronze snake and bow down to it. In other words, I don't think this has anything personally to do with the commandment of creating an image and then bowing down to it. I think it has to do with the instruction of Yehovah, and this is how I want you to do it, and this is how the healing's going to take place. So imagine someone saying, okay, I was bitten, but I'm not going to look at that snake. Well, guess what? You die. Nehemiah then adds, wait. Let's bring in 2 Kings 18:4 here. We're talking about the oh my gosh, Nehushtan. He removed the high places and broke the sacred pillars and cut down the wooden images and broke in pieces the bronze serpent that Moses had made. For until those days, the children of Israel burnt incense to it and called it. And now I've got Nehushtan. This is such an amazing story to me, Nehemiah says, because this is during the time of King Hezekiah. And he's finally getting rid of the high places and all the illegitimate worship that's going on up at the high places. And there's this relic up there. It's a relic that Moses himself made by the direct command of Yehovah. It's a relic that, if you look on it, can actually bring healing. But the problem is that the people are worshiping it, because Yehovah says, look upon that copper serpent and you'll be healed for snake bites. And what do? They start to forget what's going on. They say, oh, the copper serpent. You notice in Hebrew, in Nehemiah's scriptures, he's referring to it as a copper serpent. And this isn't addressed here, but I find that interesting when you compare it to the King James Version, both the New King James and the original King James. Anyway, back to Nehemiah. Oh, this copper serpent up on that stick is giving the healing. I'm going to worship it. And they burn incense to it. And King Hezekiah realizes it needs to be destroyed. It needs to be ground into dust, which is what it says. Kitat. He ground up into mortar. He completely turned it into dust, because even though Moses made it by the direct commandment of Yehovah, it had been a stumbling block for the people, and it needed to be destroyed. Now, Jonah then asked Nehemiah, are you kidding me? How many years are you talking about between events here in Numbers and King Hezekiah? Just some round figure. And Nehemiah says, oh, I'd say about 750 to 800 years. Now, Papa John's just like, wow, are you telling me the same staff with the snake, the copper/bronze snake, is still around 700 years later? And they're still thinking it's just, I've never connected those two. Again, the value of having a Hebrew scholar willing to open up and have a dialogue. What an incredible time we live in. I don't know of any previous age where this could be possible. I know Joseph Smith had a rabbi that he would talk to as a source. I forget his name. I think in the Doctrine and Covenants, when we study that, we'll come across some Papa John notes regarding that and other scholars. But all right, back to this story. Keith Johnson, our Methodist minister, says hundreds of years, people, they recreated the bronze snake. So, okay, maybe it was a recreation and they made their own bronze snake instead of maybe it's a replica instead of an ancient bronze. Okay, Nehemiah says, it was an ancient thing. Okay, I should be quiet and just read. And it was directly tied to Moses, legitimately so. And they said, okay, we've got healing in this. We're going to burn incense and worship it. So Nehemiah is insistent that this is an ancient thing. And previously he called it, what do you call it? Well, let me just, a relic. He called it a relic. And now he's saying it's ancient. Well, that's amazing. So back to our LDS scholar. He says, it's amazing how short this quick little episode with the brazen serpent is, when for many people it's the one story that they remember, the only story perhaps from the book of Numbers. Well, it's worth remembering it. It's actually worth pausing here, thinking, and turning aside to see. And again, he's referencing to Moses when he turned aside at the burning bush. And God honored the fact that he paused and turned aside. I hope God honors our efforts as we study these scriptures together. In a way, we're pausing and turning aside from the daily demands of our lives, or making good use of our drive time by turning aside to see. But Jared says, what's up with these fiery serpents? In fact, the way Nephi describes them, they are fiery flying serpents. So Nephi from the Book of Mormon references this, and he goes, that goes back to what Isaiah said with the seraphim and so on. And for the Nephites, they looked back to this story about looking and living often because it was a lesson that they needed to learn for Laman and Lemuel, who always complained, just like they almost belong right here in this story. Both true Israelites in the worst possible way. That's funny. So Nephi in 1 Nephi chapter 17, verse 41, it says, God did straighten them in the wilderness with his rod, for they hardened their hearts, and even as ye have, and the Lord straightened them because of their iniquity. He sent fiery flying serpents among them, and after they were bitten, he prepared a way that they might be healed. And the labor which they had to perform was to look. And because of the simpleness of the way, or the easiness of it, there were many who perished. Then Halverson interjects, then fast forward to Alma. And what does he teach? The apostates he's trying to reclaim? In Alma 33, 18 to 20, it says, these are not the only ones who have spoken concerning the Son of God. Behold, he was spoken of by Moses. Yea, and behold, the type was raised up in the wilderness, that whosoever should look upon it might live. And many did look and live. And then Halverson says, that's good to know. They weren't all hard-hearted. Then back to the verse. But few understood the meaning of those things, and this because of the hardness of their hearts. And Halverson interjects, and many still did. Back to the verse. But there are many who were so hardened that they would not look, therefore they perished. Now the reason they would not look is because they did not believe that it would heal them. From Alma, it sounds like there was a various levels of hardness of heart. So where some were so hard they refused to even look. Some soft enough they looked, but still hard enough they didn't quite understand what they were looking at. And then some soft enough to look and live because they understood what they were looking towards. Or, yeah, this is a shadow picture of. Now, fast forward one more time, Jared says, and we get to Nephi, the son of Helaman. So this is generations later, another Nephi who says in Helaman chapter 8, 14 and 15, yea, did he, and so the he there is Moses, did Moses not bear record that the Son of God should come? And as he lifted up the brazen serpent in the wilderness, even so shall he be lifted up who should come. And as many as should look upon that serpent should live, even so as many as should look upon the Son of God with faith, having a contrite spirit, might live, even unto that life which is eternal. I love hearing believers in the Americas in ancient times quoting this story that we're studying right here. And you can see variation, and it's beautiful. The fact that they're still aware of the story, it just makes Papa John smile. And back to Jared Halverson, our LDS scholar, he says, that's beautiful what Nephi and Alma and the later Nephi are teaching their people and teaching us about this beautiful story. Because Moses doesn't, at least not according to the book of Numbers, Moses doesn't explain what this is all about, and neither does he say it to his own people. Or maybe he did, it's just not on the pages here. But he certainly, at least not here in the Bible, but he certainly doesn't say anything to us about it. It's just they looked and they lived. And now we can move on. And we keep trying to make our way to the promised land. Halverson says, I'm grateful for this clarity. This is looking to the Lord and living. And what it is that keeps us from believing that it would work, it's just too simple. It's just too easy. Wow. Do you want it to be complicated, right? And then he adds, when I was in the MTC, so that would be his mission training center, just before he went to somewhere down in South America. He goes, when I was in the MTC, the best talk, the very best piece of reverse psychology I think I've ever received. One of our mission presidents for the MTC was giving a talk at a devotional and talked about how simple missionary life and missionary work really was. How simple it is to just to keep the Spirit with us. But he kept saying to us, it's so simple, you probably won't do it. Simple things like keeping the mission rules, simple things like following the commandments, simple things like staying with your companion, simple things like studying your scriptures every day and praying and giving God your all. So simple that you probably won't do it. Halverson says, I remember as a 19-year-old full of zeal and thinking, I'm going to do it because it's that simple. His reverse psychology worked on me. Well, whatever kind of psychology is happening here, it's not working on a lot of the people. Look at a brass serpent, a bronze serpent that Moses stuck on a stick. Are you kidding me? Serpents were the cause of this problem. Why on earth would I look at that serpent thinking it's going to heal me? This is illogical. It's nonsensical. It's too simple. It's too easy. I don't believe it's going to happen. They lacked faith. They lacked a contrite spirit. And that's really what God is after. Yes, this might sound nonsensical. Will you just believe? Will you just look? How on earth are you going to protect? Are we going to protect our families from the onslaught of worldly wickedness here in our day? Imagine the prophet saying, "Oh, I have a great idea. What do you think? Why don't we get together maybe on a Monday nights and sing some songs and share some stories and have some treats?" And we're like, I'm up against the powers of the wicked one, evil in high places. A song and a game. Yes, you'd be amazed. Just look and live. Just give it a shot. Exercise some faith. Have a humble enough spirit that you'll do it the Lord's way. How's your way been working out for you? For Israel here, it's not working out so good. Boy, Brother Howerson can apply things to our day, can't he? There's a pain of guilt there. I know my family, my kids growing up, we did gather on Monday nights, but maybe not as often. I mean, we did pretty good, especially compared to today's world. Back then, there wasn't so many distractions, and we enjoyed sitting around the dinner table and eating as a family. I know even as a child, for me, conversation around the table was the big part of the meal, and that's changed over time. Just life is getting that much busier. All right, let's bring this home. Jono Van Dor says, back in Numbers 21:14, therefore it said, the book of wars of Jehovah. Where's that book? So right there, I've highlighted it, verse 14. You'll see it. Wherefore it said in the book of wars of Jehovah what he did in the Red Sea and in the brooks of Arnon. Nehemiah says, that's a good question. No one knows where that book is. Keith Johnson says, no one knows, but one thing that's amazing, it's like the book of Chronicles and the book, or the kings of Israel. And we see these witnesses in Scripture that there are these other sources that were definitely in existence at the time. I think one of the things we can acknowledge, though, is that these were sources that existed, but they didn't make it into the Bible. So he finds comfort in thinking about it in that light that, well, they didn't make the cut to be added to the Bible anyway. Now, Nehemiah Gordon pushes back on that a little bit. He says, well, maybe they actually were. And let me point something out. The word book in ancient Hebrew, the word sephar, book, refers to any written document. And it talks about even a divorce decree is a sephar. It's a book. So sephar is any written thing. There are ancient inscriptions which are 10 lines long, and inscriptions that refer to them, it's written on stone in ancient Hebrew, and it refers to itself as a sefer or as a book. So sefer could be a very short document. It's very possible that the book of wars of Jehovah is simply verses 14 through 15, or this small passage here. That might be the extent, possibly even through verse 30, or I'm sorry, 20. That might be the entire extent of the book of wars of Jehovah. That might be it. It's not a very big book in that case, but we don't know. Maybe there is a bigger book and it just doesn't exist. Who knows? That's a long way of saying we don't know, right? One more footnote by Jared Halverson. They asked the Amorites if they can pass through. So they're traveling on, and they are rebuffed by the Amorites, like always. And they fight the Amorites, and they defeat them. Later they feed and fight and defeat the people of Bashan, and the story continues. And with that, I think, oh, here we go. Nehemiah has actually, verse 29, quite a large footnote. This is a song that they sang at some point. It's actually a proverb. In verse 27, it describes, therefore, those who speak the proverbs will say, and then they have this proverb. It's not clear who those proverb speakers are. Maybe they're not even Israelites, because in verse 29 it says, woe unto Moab, the people of Shemish are destroyed. Shemish is the god of Moab, the god of the Moabites, which leads me, Nehemiah says, to think that this is not an Israelite, or at least I hope it's not an Israelite poem or proverb. This may have actually been a Moabite or an Edomite or something from the area, a proverb from that region. That actually brings up a really interesting thing, which is that the archaeologists have found ancient writings, ancient inscriptions in several languages, and those include Moabite, Ammonite, and Edomites. Now remember, the Moabites, the Ammonites, and the Edomites are the cousins of Israel. And guess what? Their language is almost identical to Hebrew. So much so that if you put vowel markers in it, I would say that that's just about any literate person in Israel would be able to read those ancient Hebrew inscriptions. Now, there are some words that are different and some grammatical forms that are different, but basically, that's the same type of difference that we can have within any given language, even between American English and Australian. You've got some differences. So these differences are a little bit bigger, but basically Moabite, Ammonite, and Edomite are dialects of Hebrew. They're almost identical to the language of the Bible. So this proverb here is probably not a Hebrew proverb. It's probably an Edomite or a Moabite or Ammonite proverb. That's why it's mentioned, or that's why it's mentioning Chemish in verse 29. And we've skipped those verses, but I'm glad I pointed that out. Oh, and look at verse 28 right there. It says lords, no capitals. So those are Adonis. And he's talking about human beings, and addressing them with somewhat of a title of nobility, like my lord, or my master. Nehemiah Gordon says one more thing. I'm just so excited. They finally made it to the border of the land. Now think about that. They were just at the border of the land a couple chapters ago. But because Nehemiah pointed out years have passed, possibly 38 years, here we are right back at the finish line. But then we're going to read about these episodes again in Deuteronomy and other books. So First Samuel, Second Samuel, and the Kings and such. But boy, it's kind of a mess when you look at Scripture, how it doesn't go in chronological order. So Nehemiah, real fast, I'm just excited they finally made it to the border of the land. They're in the plains of Moab, just across from Jericho. And that excites me because I'm actually going outside for a walk 2 or 3 minutes to the top of the hill. From where I live, I can see the plains of Moab. This is something I can actually see. Hallelujah. They reached this. I mean, imagine, that means they look back and they can see Jerusalem, the heart of the land of Canaan, the heart of Israel. That's got to be exciting. They've been wandering for 40 years and they're finally there. Woohoo! And that's our episode. I hope you're enjoying these. I'm glad these are a little shorter chapters. I bet you are too. Continue to do like I always say, be a good example of the believers and live the gospel. Let these truths distill upon your heart and let the Spirit confirm them as truth or not. That's my hope and desire. I look forward to talking to everyone again soon.